you're in front of these investors and they like you and they want to invest in you. They're going to throw something called term sheets at you. So why don't you give a little explanation on what term sheets are, and then maybe some of the unique types of term sheets that you received from interested investors?
First off, getting to the point of getting a term sheet, right, from an investor is an accomplishment itself, right? Because that means you've kind of overcame some of those initial hurdles. You piqued the interest of somebody enough for them to be able to open up their wallet. So that's an accomplishment. Now the next challenge is getting through the term sheet process. And really what the term sheet is it's, it could happen one of two ways. Usually it's the lead investor that provides you a term sheet to say, this is how I'm willing to invest in your company. And a lot of that's going to be valuation. What are maybe some of the special terms they would get as an initial investor? What are some of their rights that they would have in the business when it comes to managing it day to day, or potentially just being a completely silent investor, right? And so that's really what a term sheet encompasses. Sometimes, a company does put out a term sheet when they are raising capital, and if it usually happens at a more mature stage for a business. I think when you're a startup, you're typically opening up a round, but you're looking for someone to lead a term sheet. So that's going to typically come from that investor side. And to answer your second part of the question, I think that we definitely have encountered a bunch of different, mechanisms for taking in investment back in the day. I would say we've pretty much seen everything from convertible debt structure all the way to straight equity, and buying in RideKleen. And so, I'll give an example of what we did in our first round. We took on a structure called a KISS. It's very similar to a convertible debt, but it does give an investor equity over a certain period of time once that time passes. And I think the advantage to that is you don't really have to worry about valuation today, especially for startups, because the truth is you don't really know what your company's valued at an early stage, right? It's all based on what someone's willing to buy in for, really. And so I think that the term sheet that we took on was a KISS, which really was a 2-year, almost like a 2-year term where someone would invest capital. There's some type of a cap on what the valuation would be for the business in 2 years, and then they would convert at that rate. Whether it's a better term for them, if I raised money later on and there was a down round, then I would have to then convert them at a lower valuation, or even if the company was exceeding the valuation we talked about, they'd be capped at a certain level. So that's kind of the advantage for an investor to get in early with a startup versus buying in later on. So that's the structure that we took on.
For those entrepreneurs that are maybe scared a little bit, you're hearing these terms and maybe are not that familiar with convertible debt structures or any of this jargon, what would you say to them if and when they were to receive any term sheets?
One is definitely do your homework prior to. You as the entrepreneur have to take full responsibility for your company and what decisions you make, right? Financially, operationally, whatever it is. So do your homework on some of the basic term sheets that you can expect from investors. Of course, always have an attorney do reviews on documents. And I'll use an example of something that occurred with RideKleen. When we took on this term sheet for the KISS investment, the goal for that investment was to have the investors put in capital now, and then there will be some trigger in 2 years as that note matures that they would then convert into having equity in the business based on their valuation cap. What happened was there was a term in that KISS structure where if the company was sold or there was a change in management in under 2 years, they actually have a guaranteed rate of return on their money at some multiple. And actually we, about a year in from raising that capital, we ended up exiting the company, which was unexpected. So one of the things that triggered from that acquisition was this payout to the investors. So just understand what you're signing before you actually sign something, because I think the biggest thing is that we all know how hard it is to raise capital. So when there is a term sheet in front of you and there's investors ready to write a check, your first inclination is to take it and take the money and start growing the business. But just remember what you're signing up for and understand it, because later on you may see things that pop up which you didn't realize could trigger some type of an event for these investors as well.